Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Shelf of Many Things, where I take a look at small press and independent role-playing games and RPG accessories. This time I'm taking a look at a product designed for low fantasy gaming, which I covered some time ago, but generally also compatible with D20-based systems, be it modern or OSR in design. Written by David L. McLeese of Faulty Wire Games, who were kind enough to send me a review PDF. Tradewinds, an Items and Services Compendium was released just recently, in fall of 2021. As always, I will go over the interior and the contents before wrapping up with my thoughts and evaluation of the product. This review will, of course, be based on the PDF, which is actually rather well bookmarked and organized. Available in both PDF and print-on-demand formats from DriveThruRPG, Tradewinds, an Items and Services Compendium clocks in at around 170 pages. It has a full color cover, as well as a full color interior with two-column layout set in line with full color art and charts where necessary, elegant page headers and footers with very clear and set out sections and occasional box text where notes are required. As it was designed for low fantasy gaming, the font, layout, and item description formats actually lean very much toward that product, although the art placement and quality and general ease of reference is actually more akin to a modern 5th edition product. In terms of contents, there are 18 chapters of wildly varying sizes, plus an appendix. The book leads off with a section on how to use it, then covers starting wealth by social class. Weapons follow, as well as ammunition. Shields and armor includes a section on fitting armor and the various types of armor, and then there's a streamlined burden/encumbrance system. General item and equipment get their own chapter, while trinkets and curiosities is little more than a table of trinkets and their backgrounds. Clothing details the various types of clothing and outfits available. The potions chapter includes not only new potions, but also rules for creating them and toxicity and addiction rules for systems that you would like to see them in. The lifestyle chapter details lifestyle costs and benefits for different social classes, as well as rules for meals and rations. The animals chapter that follows details a variety of mounts, pets, and transportation-related material, while paid travel, getting around the world on others' vehicles, gets its own chapter. A vehicle chapter details a variety of water, land, and air vehicles, while the trade goods chapter covers various sorts of goods that can be purchased and sold. The last real content chapter, Shops and Services, details the sort of shops and service-based businesses that the character might take advantage of in a medieval fantasy setting, while the last two proper chapters, the item population charts and random charts, are more used to flesh out the material on the fly and add ease of reference. But it's worth taking a look at things in more detail. The how to use this book chapter is actually a bit more important in this book than in the usual RPG supplements I cover, because it details a few systems that are then used throughout the book. Although these are relatively new systems, they are designed to be compatible with low fantasy gaming, which I reviewed some time ago, as I said. As such, these systems are generally consistent with existing material in that game. There is a money system that renames the basic currency system of most RPGs with historical names, although it preserves the base 10 scaling that historical systems lacked. It also adds a new tier, the pound, which is used for very, very large amounts of money. There's also a rarity and price randomization system that was reflected in low fantasy gaming, but is here fleshed out to apply to more elements. Roles for availability of an item and determining its costs are gone over, as well as guidelines on selling items and adjusting things to a game master's campaign. The coins themselves are described physically in this chapter, as well as some basic rules for crafting, which basically consist of abstracting out the costs necessary to make new material. The chapter concludes with guidelines on special metals and loot distribution for people who need them. The Starting Wealth chapter covers starting money not only by character class, but rather by social class. There are 5 levels of social class assumed in this system: royalty, nobles, vassals, freemen, and serfs, which are used not only to distribute starting wealth, but also in lifestyle costs and other sections later on. It should be noted that no specific way of determining social class is given, as this is purely the DM's discretion. Starting gear packages are also given for each social class, along with elaborating other rights and land ownership that might be allowed in a roughly historical game for those who prefer a more modern package-style assembly of starting gear and need some sort of idea on what these medieval sorts of social classes might be expected to be able to provide. The weapons chapter starts with a basic table of weapons. There generally consistent with weapons from listed in Low Fantasy Gaming System itself, but with their handedness, cost, rarity, as well as damage fleshed out, and ranges for those ranged weapons that require them. Illustrations and then specific weapon descriptions are given thereafter. Each weapon not only has a description, but also special rules for what it might do laid out here, and many weapons have additional material for what happens on a natural 19 in the Low Fantasy Gaming System. Shields and armor are similarly laid out, with a starting table listing the various types of armor by type. Armor types in Low Fantasy Gaming are abstracted into just 3 categories, and while armor in Tradewinds follows a similar scheme, more consideration is given to the differences between each armor type. General rules for armor fit, or more appropriately, ill-fitted armor, are given before each type of armor is listed, often but not always with an illustration and a description of what the armor consists of. Any special qualities that armor has are listed within the descriptions as well. The burden chapter is very short, just a few paragraphs on a half a page describing the item slot-based encumbrance system. Rather than tracking specific weights and sizes, it simply assumes characters and containers can have a certain number of items of rough sizes, either on their person or within the container, and grants suggested penalties for those who carry more. The items and equipment section, much like prior chapters on weapons and armor, starts with a table detailing common adventuring items, their size, cost, rarity, and then a page with their descriptions. After a few pages of these tables, the items are then described in detail, with name and rarity listed and out-of-the-box rules for their use. Then a more in-depth description of the item and any special considerations for it. Containers go into a bit more detail on their potential capacities and so forth. Amusingly, a few items do have special rules that require tables in order to give them a unique flavor that brings a more fantastical feel, and then some have just barely enough information to let you know that yes, a candle is indeed a candle. The Trinkets and Curiosities table is much like the Trinkets table in 5th edition, providing a list of detailed trinkets that can be placed anywhere or given to a player. While they each have enough detail to suggest a story, and some might have minor odd effects, the details of their specific background are left to the GM and can function as story hooks. The clothing chapter is again similar to the other item chapters, although it does open with a more in-depth introductory section that governs the various variations in clothing between classes and so forth. The clothing table includes a list of clothing pieces as well as their size and cost dice, although the denomination of the cost is different for simple clothing, winter clothing, and fine clothing. These categories are described within rather than each individual piece of clothing specifically. What follows is the potion chapter, and this is one of the more detailed chapters in the book. It discusses both magical and mundane potions and introduces guidelines for crafting each in the beginning. Each potion requires not only a recipe and a cost, but also a rare component that often must be acquired through adventuring. The potion charts follow, listing the name, the type, magical or mundane, the cost, and the rare component involved, and then what page the description is on. Each potion description that follows then gives details on its effects, appearance, as well as the method of creation. These potions, whether magical or mundane, walk a fine line to fit into the low fantasy gaming genre. While some might bring to mind magical potions from other D20 games, others may resemble certain concoctions from a series about a white-haired monster slayer. To the latter point, there's also potion toxicity and addiction rules. Each potion quaffed increments a toxicity counter, which then triggers a test. The test may result in toxicity effects, ranging from the merely annoying to the truly outlandish and dangerous, and may rarely result in long-term addiction to that potion type. The lifestyle chapter details living expenses by social class. This operates much like the living expenses in other games, gathering together the expected day-to-day living expenses into a single price, although this price per day here is given as a dice range rather than a flat number, which kind of defeats the purpose. However, each lifestyle level, from Serf to Royal, is described in detail, with higher-end lifestyles actually having benefits for long rests, as well as certain expected duties for higher classes. Meals are also described, this time from poor to banquet with no regard for social class, with larger and fuller meals potentially giving certain benefits to short rests. This allows even poor characters to potentially get some benefit for paying for that good meal after a long, hard adventure. Beverages are listed with descriptions and rarity similar to prior chapters of material, along with effects for beverages that might have them, especially the alcoholic ones. And the chapter closes out with a treatment of travel rations of various sorts. There's your trail rations and your millweed, of course, but there are also rations for various demi-humans. These rations may grant that particular race special benefits, while the halfling rations, interestingly enough, potentially benefit anyone who eats them when it's prepared by a halfling, thus giving halflings a little bit more utility in the game. The next chapter, Animals, starts with mounts, and for those mount types where it's relevant, mount eggs. The mounts are given size, cost to buy, rarity, and stable prices, while eggs also have an incubation period, rarity, and bag space taken listed, so you can carry them around. The chapter moves on to cover combat training, detailing cost and time taken to train any given mount type for use in combat. Each mount creature is then described, although beyond the usual name, rarity, and description, they also have combat statistics in low fantasy gaming format. The mounts cover a variety from mundane camels, donkeys, and horses to the more fantastical griffins, giant hamsters, and yellow riding birds. The chapter continues beyond mounts, though, detailing various pet and farm animals. These are similarly listed with not only tables showing what cost to buy, stabling, and the eggs where necessary, but the following descriptions also have the combat stats listed for a variety of things. The chapter concludes with some rules for saddles, packs, and barding, including the capacities for the saddle containers and the like, and the AC and weight of the three main categories of animal armor, light, medium, and heavy. They aren't broken down into specific armor types like the prior person armor. Page travel covers ship passage and land transport. The actual travel times and such are left to the GM's core rules for whatever system they're using, although passage rates are given in line with the monetary system introduced in trade winds, with some basic talk about what's involved with being a passenger covered. The vehicles chapter is much like the earlier chapters, and I'm saying that a lot because a lot of them are very similar, covering items and equipment, starting with a chart of land, water, and air vehicles, and then covering the type, cost, and rarity of each, with land vehicles also listing how many animals are required to pull them. The following pages then describe each type of vehicle in turn, with land vehicles given a basic description, weight, and load capacity, water vehicles having a description, speed, save to use in naval combat, hits they can withstand, crew required, maneuverability, and what sort of artillery they can field, and then finally air vehicles simply having a rarity, extensive description, as well as some basic information on how they work and any special rules that must be considered with them. Coming toward the end of the book, the trade goods chapter details various common bulk goods one can find, from meat to grain to valuable commodities, with cost and rarity listed, along with descriptions of each. There's a subsection on precious metals and unusual metals as well. While there's no trade system explicitly defined, when one combines the randomized nature of the prices with the earlier buying and selling system from the front of the book, one could potentially end up playing a profitable merchant. The shops and services chapter details a list of charts of services one might find within a city, along with how rare they are and what they can do. For instance, armor smiths, carpenters, butchers, apothecaries, and doctors, and so forth. Each one has a description, and many have charts detailing the costs of any given service that they may offer. The final two chapters of the game are mostly just tables. There is the item population charts chapter, which details a number of items and the people or the types of lairs and buildings that you might find them in, and gives you an easy way to figure out, what you can find in any particular sort of treasure. The random charts at the end compiles the previous charts together, but also adds a randomization number so you can once again generate an item on the fly for inclusion in treasure or in a room. Amusingly, the farm animals and pet chart includes a tastiness rating, because it is absolutely critical to know just how tasty your pet is. Just in case. Trade Winds then closes with an index and the usual OGL licensing materials. So, what do I think of it? Well, in terms of composition, the writing and editing is very solid, although I did spot a few minor typos, mostly things that a spell checker might have missed, like surfer-style surf, using when they meant the peasant-style surf, and occasional missed articles like of and the. Nothing too dramatic. The organization of the book is spot on, making it incredibly easy to navigate. This is understandable since such a large section of the book mostly consists of tables and descriptions of items and objects, with most of the really relevant rules either up front or in the particular item category itself, such as the potion toxicity rules. The art within Trade Winds is very well done for what it is, and goes a long way towards showing what various items, especially armors and weapons, look like. I found that the split between LFG style organization and the more modern art choices make Trade Winds feel like a proper official expansion to LFG rather than just a third-party book. This is helped by the fact that a lot of the new systems are very consistent with what was already introduced in low fantasy gaming and should blend seamlessly with that system, while still offering its own take that fits the genre rather well. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone who already plays low fantasy gaming, and a fair amount of the material within might actually be useful for anyone who runs any generally D20 compatible OSR game or modern game and is looking to flesh out the general goods and equipment sections of that game. It reminds me vaguely of a better version of the old arms and equipment guide from 2nd edition days. The only thing that I would have liked to see, and again this is mostly just me wanting more, and I do that a lot when I'm faced with a very good product like this, is some sort of official trading or mercantile style chapter. It's probably more trouble than it's worth, admittedly, and honestly probably not genre appropriate for low fantasy gaming, that particular system and the genre, but a formalized trading system on top of the included basic buying and selling rules, maybe an expansion thereof, would have just been icing on the cake. Again, it's more wish list territory, perhaps for a future product. Maybe even some sort of venture or merchant class would be nice if, and a future product were ever created. Just wishful thinking, I know. Anyway, on that note, I am going to wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler with my Shelf of Many Things review of Trade Winds and Items and Services Compendium. As always, I will put a link to where you can get it below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye.
And if you are still watching, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my supporters, the top tiers of which are listed on the screen, without whose support I would not have been able to offer the variety of content that I have on this channel throughout the years. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to join them, you can support the channel. There are a variety of options to do so. I have a Patreon, a Subscribestar, as well as channel memberships enabled. If you are not in a position to contribute, simply leaving a like, a comment, or sharing my videos are all wonderful ways to help the channel grow without spending a dime, and are all greatly appreciated.